What is up, y'all? Welcome back to another video. And in this video, we are going to be looking at the Detroit Lions 2020 season matchups more into detail. Let's get it started. All right, everybody, we are going to be starting a series where we look at every single one of Lions matchups in the 2020 season. We are going to be breaking them down, talking about what that team did in the offseason, talking about who I think will win and why. And yeah, it should be pretty fun. It's better than just throwing out numbers. Now, we probably will do predictions, but it's not going to be anything super serious because, you know, when we get closer to the season or right before games, we'll make those, and those will probably be better predictions because it's so far out now that things can still happen. But because the schedule is dropped and the hype is here, let's go through it, man. Let's go team by team. If you guys enjoyed the series, make sure you click the like button so I know that you guys want to see more of this. If the support is there, we will continue. If not, that's okay. We'll move on to something else. Also, make sure you guys click the link in the description. Go to the Dot Shop. I'm sorry I'm plugging all this right now, but I'm letting y'all know. Go to the Dot Shop, yo. Either look it up on Google, look it up on, I don't know, use Firefox. If you use Firefox, I don't know who used that. You got the little blue E, click that, look up Dot Shop, or link in the description, go to the Dot Shop, or click the community, go to the link there, and check out the Revenge Tour shirts for the Lions, man. They're fire. They say Revenge Tour, and then they have the schedule on the back. So definitely go check those out if you want to get one, and Hall of Fame members actually get a discount. So if you're a Hall of Fame member, you better be in the community because then you can get your promo code, and then you can go over there and get a shirt even cheaper. So there you go. Now that we're done plugging, we're going to be talking about the Lions and the Chicago Bears. So this is week one for the Lions. They play a divisional team, which is wild. This is an opportunity for them to get off on the right foot. It's also an opportunity for the Bears to do the same thing because this is a chance for both teams to be 1-0 in the division after week one, possibly tied with the division lead. Obviously, it's only 1 weekend, but it's a huge start to the season. It's a huge momentum builder if you can win your first game of the season, especially against a divisional opponent. So that's huge for the Detroit Lions, and they are at home, which is great. This will take place on 9/13/2020. ESPN actually saw us predicted the Lions will go 8-8 this season. So I'm just saying, that's pretty dang good. They usually hate on us a lot. 8-8, I can rock with that. Like, it's not good, but for ESPN, like, that's good. Like, I'm okay with that. That makes me feel good because maybe they're believing in us a little bit. Looking at the history for the Detroit Lions and Chicago Bears, Lions actually have lost the last 4 matchups against the Bears, which is not good. We got to flip that script. We got to get back to winning. We got to get back to beating divisional opponents. We really haven't done that under Matt Patricia, unfortunately. That's been a big problem. We haven't won divisional games, and you're not going to make the playoffs, and you're not going to win a division if you don't beat divisional teams. That has been a huge problem. We have only won 9 games, but we just don't beat divisional teams, and we have lost our last 4 matchups versus them. So I know Matt Patricia wants to get back on the winning side of things, and if he can do it over a divisional opponent, which is something that he's definitely struggled with, that would be huge to start the season. However, from 2011 to 2017, before Patricia came in, the Lions were 9-1 against the Chicago Bears. So I just thought I'd point that out, man. We were smacking them. We got to get back to that. I like that. I like winning all those games against one team. That feels good. So we need to get back to that. We need to get back to that streak, and hopefully we started off in week number 1. Now, looking at the Bears, they were not a good team last season. Let's just keep it simple. They were not. They were mediocre. They finished 8-8, and they were a tale of 2 sides, right? This was a team that was awful offensively and great defensively, kind of the opposite of the Lions, who were, you know, great offensively when Stafford was healthy and then terrible defensively the entire season. Looking at the Bears rankings, they averaged 17.5 points per game last season, which was 29th in the league. They were 29th in total yards per game. They were 25th in passing yards, and they were 27th in rushing yards. They were not good offensively. None of those numbers are good, okay? None of that's good. We know they don't score a lot of points. Now, on the defensive side of things, they look really good. They only allowed 18.6 points per game, which was 4th. They only allowed just over 320 yards per game, which was 8th. They only allowed 222 passing yards per game, which was 9th, and they only allowed 102 rushing yards per game, which again was 9th. So they finished top 10 in all categories on defense, and on offense, they were awful. Now, looking at the Lions' matchups last season with Chicago Bears, you can look at them and say, oh yeah, we lost the last 2, but there's a major reason we lost those last 2. We didn't have Matthew Stafford, okay? In one game, we lost 13-20. The first one, and second time we played them, we lost 24-20, and we did that without Matthew Stafford. And that's, you know, to me, that's the main reason. You probably would at least won one of those games if Matthew Stafford was healthy, and yeah, we would have at least won one, but still, our defense was not very good. But they didn't score a lot of points, and that's kind of something that actually gives me hope. Like, yes, we lost, but we lost 20-13 to a team with a backup quarterback. Jeff Driscoll played him first, and then David Blau played him secondly. And Mitchell Trubisky, for example, Lions' second game, they lost 24-20. Mitchell Trubisky looked like an actual great quarterback. He looked like it made sense for them to trade up and take him because he had 29 completions on 38 attempts, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. He looked really good. Unfortunately, he may not even be the starter anymore, and but he looked really good against us last season, which is super unfortunate. So just as bad as our defense was, we were still in position to win games with backup quarterbacks. That's just, our offense is good and they can compete, and our defense was bad, and they only gave up 20 points in the first time we played them and only 24 the second time, which isn't great, but it's not terrible. And when you look at the Lions rankings, we know with Matthew Stafford, this team was on a mission. They were only 3-4-1 to start the season, though, because the defense needs to be a lot better. All right, they were first in passing yards per game. They averaged 25.5 points per game. They just need to keep Stafford healthy, and the defense needs to be a little bit better. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about what they did in the offseason. Now, some people love what the Bears did. Some people hate what the Bears did this offseason. It's definitely, you can pick your own side on this one. Bears fans definitely probably have as well. I'm sure more Bears fans like it because you should like it if you're a Bears fan because, you got to support your team. But when you look at their offseason, Bleacher Report, I believe it was, hated it. They didn't like any of the moves. They felt like they overpaid tons of players. They brought in guys that are just going to take away from other guys. They didn't like it at all. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, I can see what they were doing. They didn't have a lot of draft picks. They didn't have a first. They didn't have a third. And they didn't have a fourth, I think. It was pretty whack. They had 2 second-round picks, but they didn't have a lot of draft picks. They spent money. I think they overpaid some players, but I didn't think it was bad. I feel like they added talent, and they're going to help out, some of the new guys that are stepping in. So let's go position by position, look at what they have for the 2020 season. Let's go. Starting off at the quarterback position, they have lost out on Chase Daniel. That was their backup quarterback to Mitchell Trubisky. He is now a Detroit Lions. So boom, we actually got a backup quarterback, but they brought in Nick Foles. They brought in Nick Foles from the Jacksonville Jaguars. They traded for him for a 4th-round pick. Now, I'm looking at Nick Foles' numbers, and if you specifically just look at his numbers, he's not that good of a quarterback, yo. His numbers are not that great. I think in 2018, he was like 70% completion percentage. Last season was like 65%. His numbers really aren't that impressive, right? 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 700 yards in 4 games, which isn't that much. I mean, that's not a lot of yards at all. So his numbers aren't that great, really, until since 2013, he was a really good quarterback. But other than that year, he hasn't been that great. He's had to deal with some injuries. We all know him for his playoff success with the Philadelphia Eagles, but that may be a little bit different with the Bears, just like it was different with the Jacksonville Jaguars. When you aren't on a very good team, maybe you don't play as well. So we'll see how that works out, but obviously I think Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky on paper is better, but obviously they're going to be competing, so that could mess up some things. That could have some ugliness. I do think that we do play Nick Foles week 1. I think he wins the starting job, but I don't know if it'll last throughout the season. We'll see. Going to running back, they didn't make any moves other than bringing in undrafted free agents. They are going to rock with Tariq Cohen and David Montgomery as their big 2 running backs. David Montgomery, who is a pretty young running back, just was drafted recently. I mean, he's shown a little bit of flashes here and there. He's definitely had some high hopes, but in college was definitely questionable. And then they got Tariq Cohen, who's kind of like the scat back out of the backfield. They just haven't upgraded it. And when you see where they finished rushing the football last season, you would think they may have went somewhere. But with not a lot of draft picks, there's not a lot they could do other than go in undrafted free agency. But I do feel like if you block really well, then you're going to be fine. And talking about blocking, let's just hop over to the offensive line next, where they made some big moves. They brought in a couple of guys. They brought in Ifeidi, I think that's his name. He's a tackle out of Seattle. They brought him in. They brought in a couple of guys. I can't say all their names. They brought in 2 linemen to end the draft at the very end. So they brought in a few linemen to compete for the lineman position, but the main thing they did at the offensive line was bring in a new offensive line coach. They actually fired their coordinator, their offensive line coach, their tight end coach, their assistant, special teams coach, all after the 2019 season. So they brought in some new guys, and they have a new offensive line coach, and that's kind of where the hope is. I believe he was successful with Notre Dame, so that's why they brought him in, and that's kind of where the hope lies. I guess that's what they're hoping, is that, he can fix that O-line. I still do believe you need talented running backs. I think we've seen it in Detroit, that you still, you can be a solid line, but you got to have some running backs as well that are talented. Otherwise, everybody can play running back, but I think their offensive line is just average, and the running backs are average. So I would say there's not much to really look at the running back position, so we'll just move on. Next up, wide receiver position, they lost out on Taylor Gabriel, and they brought in Mooney in the draft, who was out of Tulane, and they also brought in Ted Ginn Jr. Now, looking at what they did, they still have Allen Robinson, who's obviously their best wide receiver, and they have a couple of young guys like Ridley and Miller, who they're kind of hoping step up, because they need those guys to step up after losing out on some of the other guys like Taylor Gabriel. Personally, I thought Taylor Gabriel was a lot better. He seems to have some deal with some injury concerns, and his numbers aren't crazy good. They're just kind of solid, but the belief is that he's kind of already at his ceiling. He's kind of already at his peak. So the thought is that, hey, you bring in Ted Ginn Jr., who's a veteran. He's 35 years old. He can help you. He's a guy that you can rely upon. You still have Allen Robinson, who had over 1,100 receiving yards, and you have 2 young wide receivers who you're hoping can step up, but really the quarterback can make a lot of wide receivers look good. I'm just saying, okay, Matthew Stafford Stafford made Chris Durham, he made Marvin Hall, he made all these guys ball out, and I think that's very, very important. Also having a good offensive coordinator, so we'll see how the new OC does for the Chicago Bears. I think he was already there and he kind of stepped into that role for the next season. But at wide receiver, man, I don't think they got worse. I really don't. I think they have a lot of guys that they just need to step up. They're kind of like the Lions pass rushing. They just have a lot of unproven players, and they just need those guys to play well. And that's kind of a calling card of the Bears offseason. They brought in a lot of guys that were former first-round picks that can either be looked at as a steal or a cast-off. And I think that's kind of how people can look at it, because Lions have done that with a few moves as well. Guys like Reggie Ragland, who you could say, okay, that's a steal because, he was a high pick out of Alabama. He was a starter, and you got him for cheap. Or you could say, well, or he's just the team's cast-off. Now, I don't think that's how it is with the Patriots players, so don't even give me that. Those guys are talented. There's a difference between being talented and not being talented. Those guys are just really good players as well. But that's kind of something the Bears did this offseason. I believe it's 3 former first-round picks that they brought in, so they're kind of hoping those guys step up. So there's a lot of question marks with this team. At the tight end position, they kind of overhauled, right? They still have 10 tight ends on their roster. So, yeah, I mean, I can't tell you they got worse because they got a lot of options. So there you go. They brought in Cole Kmet with their first pick in the draft. They also signed a Jimmy Graham. Now, this was a controversial one because they gave him tons of money. Personally, I think they gave him way too much money, but Matt Nagy seems to really like that they brought him in, so he's kind of hyped about it. I do think it's good for quarterbacks to have reliable tight ends, like Jimmy Graham. Even if he is older, that, you can rely upon to make some big plays, possibly in the clutch, and then, to kind of help mentor a young tight end in Cole Kmet, because as we've seen in history, tight ends that step in day one aren't usually the best and take some time to develop. And I think Cole Kmet may not look as good this season as he will in future years. And he's definitely something that's going to have an impact on how the Lions cover him, because in the past, Lions have had trouble covering tight ends. I don't know if it's been as bad with Patricia, but we'll see. They definitely have some hybrids that could help out there. But I think it's super important that you have a veteran tight end. Lions did that. They brought in Jesse James and they drafted TJ Hockenson, probably knowing that historically the first year isn't always the best for a tight end, and we've seen that with guys like Gronkowski. So hopefully TJ can step up, and hopefully Cole Kmet doesn't step up, just being honest here. All right, let's move on to the defensive side of things. And on the defensive line, they made a couple of moves, couple of depth moves, but they lost down with guys like Nick Williams. There's nothing crazy they did here again. I think it's pretty much the same. Akeem Hicks is coming back, so that's huge. When you get him back after missing 11 games, that's kind of what everybody's hyped about in Chicago. So the thought is, him back, he's going to help get a lot of pressure from the interior, which he definitely can, and that's kind of the main thing they did on the defensive line. At the edge position, they made a huge move, probably the biggest move of free agency for them. That was bringing in Robert Quinn from the Dallas Cowboys, who had 11.5 sacks last season. Now, they signed him to a huge contract. They have $80 million tied up between and Khalil Mack, I think, for the next three years. Is that between both? I think it's just him. They got a lot of money tied up there. So they're pretty much broke now because of that. But they do have 2 good elite pass rushers in those players who are getting a little bit older. I think Quinn's almost 30 now. So they're getting a little bit older. And Quinn is a little inconsistent. But if they get what they got last season, you get a guy that had 11.5 sacks with Khalil Mack, with Travis Gibson, who they drafted. There could be some pressure, and they already got pressure a lot before. They could get even more pressure. So they're stacking that defense. They're going edge rusher, and honestly, I kind of like it. I feel like they're trying to make that pass rushing position scary, so good for them. The hope is that Quinn kind of has what he's done before, and that's, before last season, not getting double-digit sacks, having to deal with injuries. So for Lions fans, that's kind of what they're banking on. At interior linebacker position, they made a few moves. I mean, the main one is bringing back Trevathan. They extended him for 3 years. Really, what they did here is they lost out on a lot of depth, but they still have some guys that they can rely upon as starter. It's that when those guys come out, if there's injuries, their depth is pretty much depleted. And at the cornerback position, where they brought in Artie Burns, who was a former first-round pick, I believe, Jalen Johnson in the draft from Utah. Jalen Johnson, I actually like Jalen Johnson. I think he was like my 5th or 6th ranked corner. He was fine. He didn't look that fast on the field, but he was very consistent. I don't think the talent was great that he played against, but I think he can help out day one for sure. And then they brought in Kendall Vilder. Then they lost out on Prince Amukamara. So I feel like they at least stayed the same there, maybe got better. And then at safety, they have Gibson, who is kind of stepping into that new Clinton Dix role, who left. So boom, that's what they did at each position. I feel like they upgraded a little bit here and there. They just have a lot of unproven things. They're just like the Lions, I feel like, in that way, where they got a lot of former top picks that they're hoping can step up, guys returning from injuries, and that's kind of where they think they're improving, is guys returning from injuries. When you look at them, though, I think the Bears, I think it's kind of a mess at quarterback. I still don't think they're a great offense. I don't think Nick Foles is a great quarterback. I think he's good when he's in a great environment, but I don't think he's a great quarterback. I don't think he's going to carry the offense. I still think they're going to be one of the not good teams. They're probably going to be below average again this season. Let me just say that. Offensively, defensively, I can see them being one of the top defenses again. I mean, you had a couple of secondary players. You didn't lose too many big names defensively. You brought some guys back. You got a reliable safety who had 8 picks in the last 3 years. Defensively, I feel like they're solid. Depth may be a little bit of a concern, but you got some pass rushers, and defense can be scary, and it's going to throw Big V into the fire right away, man. This guy's going to have to go out and prove himself. I think Big V is the X factor for the Lions in this one. Can he hold up against the pressure on the edge? We may even use tight ends again to help block, but Matthew Stafford obviously is the MVP for us because we need him to be a beast, and I think he can be a beast, and I think we're going to look a lot better versus the Bears. I do think the Lions win this game. I think on paper, the Lions are more talented. They have too many weapons, and I don't think they're going to score tons of points because the Bears are a good defense, and I can see Stafford getting sacked a couple of times, but I think the Lions are going to go to the run. They're going to try to make those pass rushers respect other things like the running game, like screens. I can see a lot of that Darrell Bevel mixes in. So that's kind of what I'm expecting for this one. Not a high-scoring game. I think it'll be, maybe like the second matchup just the other way. So I'm going to go Lions 24, Bears 17. That's kind of how I see this one going in week number 1, but I do think the Lions pull it out, and I think it's going to be big for Big V. So he's the X factor. Let me know your thoughts, comments below. Thank you, Prep, for watching. If you guys want to see another one, make sure you click the like button. Thank you, Prep, for watching.